things oriented, and then we'll leave a good amount of time for questions at the end. So I will go through these slides efficiently, not too quickly, but I do want to leave time so that we can address questions that any of you might have, and we can keep it as kind of an open discussion. So the quick safety message for today is just about school bus safety. So this one, I know it usually comes out when the school year starts, but with kind of the strange way that the schools are operating nowadays, I think the schedules are adjusting a little more frequently. Buses are going out at different times that you might not expect. So you might be running into, buses more as you're going out and about nowadays. So really the main thing here is just to make sure that you're looking around and you're aware anytime you're near a school bus. Obviously there are kids that are going to be associated with it, so they're going to be running around, either getting on or getting off. So really, if you're in any situation other than a 4-lane road and you're approaching the bus, you really want to make sure you stop, let the kids get out. The bus drivers will have an extra amount of time that they need to kind of wrangle the kids and make sure they get their masks on and they didn't forget anything. And the seating situations are kind of different. So just be patient, follow the rules of the road, slow down, and give them that extra 20 or 30 seconds just to make sure the kids are safe and everyone's good. So just a quick reminder of bus safety. So now we'll get into the transmission results here. I'll go through those first. So this slide is showing kind of where we started at and where we arrived at today. So originally the scope of the transmission study, looking at all the interconnections to the transmission system, and from that perspective, it had about 937 megawatts. So when that as attrition went forward and things changed with certain projects in that group, the May 2020 totals were down to 703. So we had about 372 that were reviewed by the RC and approved back in November of 2019. And then in May of 2020 is when we went back to the RC NEP went back to the RC with the remaining 391 megawatts and got approval for that. And as you all know, May 2020 was the time that once we had that RC approval, we issued the release of the distribution impact studies. And we'll talk about those distribution side studies in the next portion of the slide deck. As of now, in October 2020, because of the attrition that we saw over the summer, there was a need to kind of reassess the transmission portion of things, leveraging most of the work that was already done going into the May 2020 results. So the results of the restudy, it was looking at a total of 529 megawatts. So it did require a recheck and a look at all of Part 1 and Part 2. So that's what NEP performed and provided to the RC committee, and it's actually going through for approval, final approval today. But the results show that all of the upgrades that were previously identified are still going to be required with the current megawatt amounts that are in the queue. With the exception of one, there was some work at the Chestnut Hill substation that will no longer be required. But all the other work that we saw that was needed as of May that we had reported out to you, that is still going to be required now. So that's going through the reliability committee today. We don't expect any pushback, and we're hopeful that's going to go through without any issues, but it has been a matter of coordination, and NEP has been working through the results with them along the way. So we expect that it will get approved today, but that meeting is happening today. So here is showing the summary of what the system upgrades are that are coming out of the transmission study. So issues were found on the transmission system. These items listed here is what would be needed to mitigate those issues that were found. And we have it listed based on what has been seen as a no-cost solution or as a asset condition work that the company, that NEP will be taking on, and which elements would be something that is exclusively due to the addition of DG to the system and would not be done otherwise if not for the DG. So looking at the first few here, we have the A1, B2 line reconductoring, which is the most significant amount of work on the deck here. However, it was found to be justified under asset condition work. So NEP is taking that on as an internal project right now and has begun the initial stages of progressing that. And the total timeline for that to come online is a 6 to 7 year expectation. Now, this one is important because the A1B2, although it is taking on the cost by the company, the work does have to get completed in order for the DG to interconnect. So as part of the asset condition work and addressing that issue, the rebuild of the line also addresses the ability to accommodate the DG. So although developers are not going to be paying towards this first one, they do have to wait for it to get done in order to be able to come online safely. Looking at the next two at Deerfield and Vernon substations, those are less substantial than the A1B2. There'll be a 4 to 5 year expectation for work on those, and that would be for bus work and switching and certain things happening within the substation to address some thermal concerns on the transmission side. And then skipping down to number 5, Deerfield 2 sub. There was an issue that was found with voltage that was related to the Deerfield 2 sub, but there was a solution that was found with working with a synchronous generator on the line for contingency events. So there won't be work that's required there, but there's some, I guess, operational steps that would need to be taken. The two here that I think folks will be most interested in are number 4, which is the Otter River substation. So that is going to be essentially to add in a dynamic VAR compensator, which is going to be there for voltage support of the transmission line. And that is exclusively because of the DG coming on and the effects it's having on transmission. So that is estimated to be a $50 million effort with a 5 to 7 year timeline for interconnection. And the final column there is noting the total amount of megawatts in queue today that is affecting the need for that upgrade and triggering the issue on the transmission system based on the modeling, and therefore would be responsible for the cost of that upgrade. So for the Otter River substation DVAR, it's 29.5 megawatts that we see in queue right now. That would be responsible for that $50 million upgrade. And the final one there, 7 on the E5 F6, due to some thermal constraints on the transmission line, there is some breaker work and line work that's going to have to occur that is estimated at $2 million with a 2 to 3 year time frame. And that's associated with 24 megawatts of projects connecting to that E5 F6 line. The last one on here I just wanted to touch on is at Wendell Depot, a reactor is needed also for voltage support. But in that situation, there was the ability to install that reactor on the distribution side. So it's actually going to be installed on the 15 kV side of the substation, and it will be able to address the concerns that was seen on the line from the transmission side. So just to keep it clear, we put that distribution cost into the distribution section of the slide deck. So that work is being triggered by the results of the transmission study. However, it's going to be part of the distribution scope. So that's the brief summary of the transmission, and now I'll move on to the distribution results.
Hey, Mike, as well. I just wanted to jump in real quick around questions. So we did take some questions ahead of time. We hopefully are going to cover all that here in the next few slides. But if you guys do have questions along the way, that link that was part of the invite itself is still active. You can still submit questions through there. That's preferred. And we'll address all those questions at the end of the presentation here. But we think we got a lot of good information coming here over the next several slides. And if you have questions, submitting it through that link in the invite is probably the best way to do it. Sorry about that, Mike.
Oh, no, that's great. Thank you. Well, I should have mentioned that at the outset, so thank you for that. Yeah, and like I said, so we will leave a good amount of time at the end to try to go through all those questions, and we can address them at the end of the slide deck. So, so here with the distribution results, similar to transmission, I wanted to kind of show where we came from and where we are today. So from November of 2018, well, so to start at the very beginning, with all of the applications that came in, we saw 7 specific areas of our service territory that were getting higher volumes of applications than others. And it was immediately showing the need for substation replacement, rebuild, brand new substation additions. So large scale infrastructure upgrades from the distribution perspective. So that's how we came to the 7 areas that you see on the screen here. In November 2018, those totaled about 480 megawatts. As we progressed through, attrition occurred, various changes and projects occurred. By May of 2020, when we issued the area distribution results to you, we were looking at 275 megawatts total in all of those areas. Going into the detail study, again, with attrition occurring, some projects dropping out, it's a total of 133 megawatts now. So obviously it's reduced since we started in November 2018, but it's still a significant chunk coming on in these areas that is still affecting the need for certain upgrades. So those upgrades are summarized here. So you'll see a lot of what was required from what we reported out in May has been reduced or altered. So whereas in May we were talking about a number of new substations being built, we are now down to one new substation that is still required. There are 6 substations that are going to need some sort of expansion or build out, and all of these areas still require a very significant amount of distribution line work, whether it be new line extension, altogether new lines coming out of the substation, reconductoring, or just rearrangement of the area to try to accommodate switching needs and things like that. So there is a fair amount of D-line work. So looking at the, I'll roll through each one real quickly just to give you the brief overview. So in the Gardner area, we got almost 32 megawatts, and the main upgrades there are at the East Winchendon and Westminster substations. So those are going to be the 2 subs that are going to get expanded and worked on to accommodate the 32 megawatts. In Leicester, we still have 21 megawatts remaining, and we'll be upgrading North Oxford and retiring the Leicester substation to replace it with a new substation at Stafford Street, which will be able to better serve the area and accommodate that total 21 megawatts. In the Brookfield area, we've also called this the Meadow Street area. You may hear it referred to as. We have nearly 15 megawatts, and the work there is going to be to upgrade the Meadow Street sub and the Lashaway subs to be able to accommodate that. Over in Barrie, we have nearly 33 megawatts, and it's going to be an upgrade of the Barrie and Ware substations, so work at those 2 is still required. In Athol, this is where we have Wendell Depot, so the main work there is upgrading that substation, which is triggered by a need from the transmission study, but there will also be other more relatively minor upgrades to the substation due to the distribution needs, and there will be still a significant amount of line work going on in the Athol area. For Palmer, we have nearly 14, and it'll be an upgrade at the Little Rest Road substation is what's being seen as a need. And in Belchertown, with the attrition, we are now down to 8.8 megawatts. So there'll be minimal substation upgrades, but again, a fair amount of line work that's going to have to get done to be able to accommodate the shifting in that area. Because so Belchertown and all these areas, really, they have had a significant amount of penetration prior to going into these studies. So regardless of what the numbers land now compared to where they were in 2018, the saturation in all of these areas is still extremely high, which is what really is part of another driver of the need for these upgrades, and showing that the additional megawatts on top of that, it does affect some additional scope and upgrade in the area. The note at the bottom here is just showing, just to note that these are the distribution upgrades and the transmission upgrades are separate. So we were trying to keep that kind of separated out in the slide deck, just to be clear what's going to be transmission side work and what's going to be distribution side work. For the cost for the distribution upgrades, that's what we have listed here. So I won't read through all the dollar values, but you can see what the totals are. We have one column is listing the megawatts studied. So that would be the total number of megawatts that are going to be responsible for the shared assets in the area and shared costs. So the substation work listed here, it is identifying all the work that's going to happen inside the substation fence for that substation upgrade from the distribution study needs. So as you can imagine, the substation itself does have transmission and distribution components. So when we list substation scope here, we are talking about the transmission and distribution work inside the fence for the substation work itself. Really, it's looking at the thinking about transmission side taps to serve anything new at the substation, any other transmission or NEP assets that are inside the substation to be able to upgrade that sub for the needs seen from the distribution study. D-line work is just related to the line extension and the line work itself outside of the substation fence on the distribution system. And then the total is totalizing everything there. So a lot of questions that are coming from this will probably be addressed in the next section, where I'm going to talk through kind of cost expectations and how cost sharing and all that is going to work, and what the responsibilities will be. So we'll get into that next section now. So this slide is to just show and illustrate that there were two different studies that were performed, right? So there was two different levels of infrastructure upgrades that are going to be required. So there are distribution upgrades that are going to be required. So there are certain projects that were within an area study, and they'll need to contribute toward a distribution solution only looking at MECO side assets. Conversely, there are some projects that were not in area studies at all, and they were put within, they were still within the transmission study, however, and on a transmission line that needed some sort of solution. So there'll be projects that pay just towards the transmission side solution. And then there are some projects that overlap. So certain projects will have been within an area study and have distribution system upgrades that they'll be responsible for, and also coming out of the transmission study, be responsible for their portion of the upgrades from the transmission. So they were two separate and distinct studies coming up with transmission and distribution side asset work, and some projects will be in an area where those two scopes overlap, and that means those projects are contributing to the need for both the T and D upgrades. So they're going to have to be contributing towards both for a cost. So as far as the actual cost estimate and expectations, so within the estimates that you've received, anything that the company, either MECO or NEP, has found that would be justified as system improvement work, that work has been, the cost for that work has been removed from the totals that you've been provided within the studies. So anything that is system improvement related, the cost for that was already subtracted from the cost estimates that were provided in the system impact studies that you received recently. So that work has already been removed, trying to account for what would be a company-driven portion of the work to move forward. The estimated costs in the system impact studies from the distribution perspective, so those are going to align with the mass tariff, and those are at a plus or minus 10% estimate accuracy. Any of the costs associated with the transmission work, that actually will end up getting reconciled to actual costs in accordance with NEP's FERC tariff. There is a different estimate accuracy level and expectation of total costs in the end if we're talking about distribution versus transmission or NEP assets. As far as cost sharing goes, all of the modifications for the transmission and the distribution system, which we're highlighting those first two bullets under cost sharing, those will all be allocated to the developers on a per megawatt basis. So although the costs are separate and distinct, they're going to be shared in a similar fashion, dividing it up per megawatt for the pro rata share from the total developers affecting the need for that particular upgrade. And the ISAs will identify the total area costs as well as your current pro rata share based on megawatts in queue at that time. However, that total cost is not going to change. So the cost for the work is what it is, and that's it's based on the estimates that we have today. However, the pro rata allocation could change as attrition occurs. So as projects drop out, or if projects should drop out or not sign ISAs, the total megawatts remaining is what that system modification cost will get divided over. So that would be true for either the upgrades coming out of the distribution study or the transmission study. So attrition and number of megawatts moving forward will affect the pro rata allocation to each individual project. And this slide here is speaking to carrying charges. So wanted to make sure everyone was aware of these and understands how they work and what they really apply to. So this is right now here I'm talking about the transmission carrying charges. So these would be for the NEP assets in this case that it's an ongoing annual fee that relates to various portions of that capital investment. So it includes O&M, property tax, and other similar carrying costs associated with that upfront investment. So these are assessed by NEP, by the ASO, and would be applied to the EDC. So this is a transmission charge that is passed through and passed down, and would be applied to the customers that are, again, affecting the need for the upgrade. So going along with the cost causation principle and the way that the tariff and everything is currently aligned, these costs would be passed down to the developers on the projects that are prompting the need for that upgrade. So NEP's current rate is 5.21%. So that's calculated based on a formula in NEP Schedule 21. And within the slide deck here, we have a link to it, and something that if you just search for NEP Schedule 21, you'll be able to find it online as well. So it is out there if you want to look at it in more detail. And it's also aligns with and is in accordance with FERC Form 1. So what it is the total charge gets calculated as a product of the total gross plant investment and the annual carrying charge rate. So the rate that's been calculated, as we note here, is 5.21%, and that would be applied to the cost of the upgrade that you're associated with. So where we showed the any of the transmission side or NEP asset work in the previous slides, this rate would be applied to that, and that's what can be expected as an ongoing charge for the projects in those areas. And again, it is only going to be applied to your pro rata share of what the investment would be. So there is a bit of sharing from that sense, but this is something that you can expect to have going forward and should be factored into the ongoing financials of the project. So yeah, last bullet here, all ASO upgrade costs and the associated carrying charges. So all of the NEP associated charges, including the carrying charge, are passed down to the DG project that are causing the need for those upgrades. So for the interconnection service agreements, the ISAs, these will be delivered once we have customer document corrections, which were provided to you already. So once we have those, the ISAs would be issued following that, and they would identify the distribution system modifications, any project-specific costs you have, as well as the pro rata share of the shared scope costs, and also the milestone-based implementation schedule. So you'd have that from the distribution perspective. From the transmission side, if you're in an area that has transmission upgrades required, there would be the project-specific costs there as well. Again, it would tell the total with the pro rata share and the implementation schedule for that work as well. So it would be very similar to ISAs. Just note that there will be a distinction between distribution and transmission requirements in this one. Cost allocation is going to be based on the area costs overall, and will be reassessed due to any attrition. So again, aligning with the cost causation principle, and we're also will be providing any revised cost responsibilities based on attrition if megawatts were to drop out from a particular area. The ASO upgrade costs and the associated carrying charges will be in there, so you will have that spelled out as to what the carrying charges are and what the upfront capital investment is. And the carrying charges will be collected when the DG facility is energized, plus the cost of security before that estimated date. So there'll be could be a letter of credit or something similar required ahead of the actual energization date, but carrying charges would not apply until the asset's in place and your site is near energization. And details can be provided around that as we get closer to that time, but that's the general expectation of when those carrying charges would be expected for your project. And the ISAs will also have any contingencies for permitting, approval, and land rights, things like that. So again, very similar to what you've seen in other ISAs, but there is the extra detail and clarity that we're going to provide around the transmission upgrades versus distribution and how the carrying charges lay out for your particular project. The payment schedules, so there has been a recently amended order from the DPU that did revise payment schedules somewhat. So we will be looking to align with that, which has the 25% payment due in the first 60 business days, with the remaining 75% due in the next 120 business days. So that's the current payment expectation right now. Again, trying to align with the recent order that came out from the DPU regarding queue management. So last slide I have here is just about next steps and what to expect. So the next step in terms of process for these projects is to have the corrected documents provided back to the company. And then from there, we would provide the ISA, which would allow you to execute the ISA, and then we can move forward down the construction path. Alternatively, for any project, there's the option to withdraw if you don't wish to go ahead with the ISA. So it's really in those two buckets right now as far as what we believe the decision is on the customer side right now. Just to note, the asset condition work that we identified in the earlier slides, in particular thinking about the A1, B2 upgrades on the transmission system, those are still going to progress. So anything that we see the need for asset condition work or replacement and have a justified need from either the NEP or MECO side to progress with work, we will be progressing those efforts. But everything that we identified for the distribution and transmission upgrades here, that all is not going to be progressing in total, because much of it is required only if the DG seeks to interconnect. So we don't have really a system need to upgrade or change and perform that work unless the DG is coming online. So there will be some of it that's moving forward, but much of it would require the signed ISAs and the commitment from the sites to move forward. And there are new distribution study groups that are in formation in these areas right now. And those are aligned and moving ahead process-wise, aligned with the group study provision in the tariff currently. So the scoping activities and group formation for those is underway right now. In the next few weeks, we'll be moving forward with scoping meetings and things of that nature, getting us towards and into the stage of the engineering analysis for that group. So, and we have a link to the group study, the DPU orders relevant to the group study on the slide as well. If you want to read for more detail about the specifics on timing and total study duration and things like that. So that was the real content I wanted to get through for today, giving you the update. So I think we could go to the questions if that makes sense. So let me see what we have on our questions that we've received so far. So the first one, I'll just kind of go through them one at a time, and Will or Jen or anyone else from our side, if feel free to jump in as well. But I'll try to roll through them here. So, will National Grid be paying for a portion of the shared costs, or will those costs be shared solely by the project? So, I think we touched on this, right? So the cost for system improvement work that's been identified would be taken on by the company, and those costs have already been removed from the totals that you've received, and the remainder that is system modification work or transmission upgrade work that is required exclusively because of the DG. Those are the costs that will still be shared by the projects that are connecting to that area. So next one is, how will National Grid accommodate further queue attrition, and would additional technical analysis be required if significant numbers of additional projects drop out? So this does depend on the amount of attrition, and we're going to have to make decisions as those come forward. So depending on how the attrition plays out and which projects drop and how many megawatts drop out in each area, it will really drive whether or not there is a need for a restudy. In certain cases, if there's a modest amount of attrition, it will still be apparent from an engineering perspective and analysis perspective that the scope is still required, and that there wouldn't be a need to adjust the scope that we've identified. If it's significant, we may need to take another look. So we're going to be looking at those as the attrition occurs, and any effect to your project, we would be reaching out to you to let you know what the effect would be. But yeah, so we're going to have to take attrition as it comes, and take it kind of on an area by area basis. How is additional hosting capacity being evaluated for the distribution system modifications? So the hosting capacity in terms of what is being provided within the solutions for the area. So there's a certain amount of additional hosting capacity that would be available, but that's only based on the standard sizing of our equipment. So for instance, if we see a certain amount of megawatts in one particular area, and it prompts the need for a 40 MVA transformer at the substation, that 40 MVA is our standard size. So we may not have had exactly 40 MVA or 40 megawatts of distributed generation looking to interconnect there. So by nature of the standard sizing of different assets and equipment on the system, there is some additional capacity available. If there was a situation where we did elect to upsize or upgrade some element of the substation work or scope, that was not specifically needed by the DG in queue right now, but was prudent system planning. That was taken on by the company as system improvement work. So there are certain elements of hosting capacity and additional enable capacity that were factored in. However, wholesale, extremely large build outs to accommodate future DG projects were not undertaken as part of the solutions here. Let's see, what substations are impacted by the transmission upgrade scope where DER will not be able to go online until transmission work is completed? So the previous slide where we were showing the total megawatts associated with each one of the transmission upgrades, those are going to be the projects that are on substations that would need to wait for the transmission work to get completed prior to being able to interconnect. Because like we showed on that Venn diagram there, because there is an overlap on which projects have distribution or transmission related scope, each one of the projects that would have a transmission obligation to wait, you'll be notified of that in your ISA and in your in the study report results. So I think that it could be difficult to say right here, but in general, on the A1 and B2 for Otter and Otter River, we are looking at the Crystal Lake, Chestnut Hill, Royalston, East Westminster, and Ware substations. And so, in Westminster, and then for the Ware sub work, we're looking at Ware, Lashaway, Belchertown, and Shutesbury. So we can get that out to summarize that for you, so that you have that, because I know I rattled those off pretty quickly. But I do want to highlight that you really want to look to your study report results and the ISAs to be able to know for sure what the implications for your particular project are, because again, there are overlaps and who has to actually wait and who can move forward. Question here about whether or not these results have been shared with the DPU, and yes, they have been shared with the DPU, and we haven't received a lot of specific feedback or direction or anything to change, but the results have been shared with the DPU. We're trying to be as transparent as we can with the results and getting them out in front of you folks as soon as we have them, and also being able to share with the DPU. So let me see. So there are some questions on total megawatts and things, but I believe these were received before we went through the slides. So I believe that any questions related to total megawatts in each area and total megawatts associated with each upgrade, I believe that was answered in our earlier slides. So I'm going to refer you back to the previous slides on those, and we will be posting these, so you'll be able to have them to review in a little more detail following the session. Do any electricity consumer customers ever get charged transmission carrying charges? And if not, why are generation customers on the distribution system being charged these costs? So the carrying charges is an element of the FERC approved tariff and way that NEP is able to operate. So it's not just NEP. It really is any affected system operator. So any transmission operator that we would be interacting with. It just so happens that for this portion of Massachusetts where this work is going on, the transmission operator is NEP, New England Power. In other portions of the territory, it is operated by other entities, but in this case, we are talking about NEP. So any customer that's having a impact on the transmission system, requiring the need for an upgrade, they would be assessed the carrying charges. So there's a whole formula and way that it's calculated. So it calculates out if there is a kayak and if there's not, and what the carrying charge would be. And it is the responsibility of any of those customers that are prompting the need for that upgrade to continue with the carrying charge associated with that. So this is not something that's unique to the DG customers. It is something that, given the nature of what we're dealing with here, we're looking at very large scale transmission upgrades that I don't think many have really encountered before. But this is something that is standard and not just unique to the DG.
Hey, Mike, Tim Rowan here from the company. Let me carrying charges are passed through your transmission adjustment surcharge on your electric delivery bills. So all of the customers have been paying these costs for decades, right? It's just part and parcel. There's both distribution delivery charges in the delivery bill, as well as transmission delivery charges, as well as system benefit charges, the new smart factor, for example, and those recovery mechanisms take place. So yes, every customer pays for these. It's just where there's no electric bill that's paid for by a standalone power plant. This is how we need to, make sure the appropriate parties are paying for it. Because again, all of the customers pay for all aspects of the transmission system through that adjustment clause on the bill. So.
Okay, thank you, Tim. So continuing down the list here of questions. So we have, can we follow up with CEI if the amounts on these slides do not match our reports? So absolutely, if you see any inconsistencies here or have any questions, feel free to reach out to your job owner and they can walk through it with you. And if needed, we can bring in other folks from DPAM or myself to kind of go through the details if needed. So absolutely, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the job owner. How much contingency is included in the transmission or distribution estimates? So as we were noting on the previous slides, we did have the cost estimate accuracy on the distribution side estimates coming in the distribution study, aligning with the mass tariff. So that's going to be a plus or minus 10% estimate accuracy overall for the total cost of that work and scope. And the amount for transmission is it is going to be reconciled in the end to actuals. So that's what can be expected for the transmission side work. And will payment timelines be adjusted for projects that need to wait for long interconnection timeframes? And can they wait until the distribution work is ready to begin in order to pay that portion? So we, right now, the cost timelines that we are trying to align with is what we showed in the previous slide. So trying to align with the queue management order that recently came out. And the 60 business day window for 25% and 75% in the next 120 days. So that's currently the time that we have for the work that is needed for each of the projects. And for any of these, thinking about cost as well, there is a possibility to have reconciliation done at the end of the project. So it's the ability to for the distribution side, or it's going to automatically be reconciled on the transmission side, and the distribution side, there's the ability for reconciliation upon request. So you can confirm the total cost at that time as well. And the slides for this will be posted before the end of the week. We have a few questions on that, so you'll be able to have those and digest them a bit more. And And again, always open for questions. If you have any questions or concerns, you can reach out to the job owner, and we can go through those. Let's see, a couple more questions are still rolling in here. So the cost estimate threshold and the amount of contingency and the estimate are different things. Is the contingency the typical 25%? So I don't have the exact contingencies in front of me right now, but if you want to know for it, we can follow up with that if you have questions. If you want to reach out to your job owner, we can talk through that at a later date. So will the deadline for decision on Friday, October 23rd be extended for additional review? Actually, Will, do you want to take this one?
Yep, sure can. So so it won't be, yeah, so I think it can be extended. So each project has the ability to request an extension equal to the length of that step. So if you are looking for an additional 15 business days to be able to provide document revisions, right, you just need to, in the portal, let us know that you're requesting the extension for this step, and we can give you the additional 15 business days to be able to again further digest this, and then also make those document revisions as necessary.
All right, thanks, Will. Next question, would attrition include voluntary reduction of project capacity? So reduction of capacity is still something that could lead to the need for a restudy or a reevaluation of the area potentially. So reduction, I guess, could be considered, but yeah, so I guess the answer is yes. It would include voluntary reduction. However, we can't give any firm commitment on a change to the total scope based on a small reduction of a particular site. With the totals that we're seeing in these areas, there would need to be a notable amount of attrition in order to really justify the need for restudy work, because the need for these upgrades would still be apparent with a very modest attrition rate. So it could include a reduction of project capacity. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that the total cost for the area would change your per megawatt share, perhaps. But again, that usually with reductions in capacity, and we have found in the past that oftentimes it leads to changes to elements of the design, changes to scope. Things tend to snowball. So I do ask that if you are considering something like that, you need to reach out to the job owner. We'd have to talk it through and see what the implications would be. But it wouldn't necessarily be a simple, straightforward change in all cases. So we would want to make sure we're understanding what that change would actually be for your particular site and how it would fit into your particular area, knowing the scope of upgrades and everything needed at that space. So the total all the questions coming in seem to have subsided a bit. If you're having trouble with the Google Doc, I guess I'll open it up too. Feel free you could take yourself off mute and ask the question if needed. But we'd kind of rather have them here in the doc just so we can make sure to send out and get the answers. Make sure we have the answers to everyone's questions out there. But if you're having trouble with the Google Doc, you can speak up now and ask your question out loud.
Mike, this is Fred Unger. We sent you and Will a request for considering the possibility of putting all the projects that want to back into an extended study period in order to anticipate, hopefully, the DPU changing the cost causation or cost allocation methodologies. We think it's something that pretty much everybody on this call would want to do, because or at least everybody in the Gardner area. I didn't look at the other areas carefully, but with the current numbers, it's going to be infeasible for most projects to move forward. And I think they would be much more feasible under a different cost allocation methodology.
Yeah. So yeah, understanding that some of the news here is challenging for a lot of projects. So totally understand that. We did receive that request, and we're looking at it right now, and we're trying to consider the best path forward. And we do plan to be, they'll involve some discussions with the DPU and some more internal discussions with our legal teams, looking at different provisions of the tariff, the groups, the more baseline provisions of the tariff work. So we are considering it right now, but we don't have a firm answer for you at this time.
Thank you.
All right. So not seeing any more questions coming in on the Google Doc, and not hearing anybody else speak up. I think that may be it for everything we had for today. Will or Jen, I don't know if you had anything else to close things out with, but I think that was the real content we wanted to make sure we got through.
Yeah, Mike, nothing more on my end. I think we covered everything. Obviously, feel free to reach out to CEI, your job owner, myself or Jen, and we can work to get answers if you have specific questions. Feel free to email. We have, it might take us a little bit of time depending on the nature of the question to get the answer and get back. So if you do have questions, feel free to either submit those through the portal, through the chatter, or send an email giving us a chance to dive into them. And if we need to set up more time for a one-on-one discussion, we are available for those type of discussions here over the next few weeks. And like I said, if you are looking for an extension on the doc revision time frame, it's as simple as letting us know in the portal chatter that you're requesting that extension, and we can work through that so that you don't get any portal notifications that you would not be expecting.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining today. Appreciate the time, and hope you have a good rest of the week.
Thank you guys for putting this